Hello dear friends, let me start today with an event that has shaken the recent geopolitical landscape. On January 3, 2026, US Special Forces carried out a lightning surgical operation in Caracas, capturing Nicolás Maduro, then President of Venezuela, not recognized as the legitimate president of the country by the United States nor by other countries in the international community. Trump, at a conference in Mar-a-Lago, presented this operation as the direct application of the Monroe Doctrine, but in an updated and practical version. Imagine the impact of this. It wasn't just a surgical military action, but a clear message to the Western Hemisphere. Donald Trump explained that this is not a military intervention like so many in history. Following this same line of thought, we would be witnessing the emergence of a new stage in the pendulum of history. We might have a later stage of stabilization, a reordering of forces, very necessary for the lives of the suffering American peoples. And what matters most to me as a thinker is to ask ourselves, will this sought-after stability in the historical pendulum, favoring the daily lives of millions of ordinary people, those who struggle day by day for security, prosperity, and a bit of peace, be able to last over time? Let's break it down step by step, with clear minds, without overflowing passions, seeking the truth like a stoic in the middle of the storm. To understand the present, we must look to the past. The Monroe Doctrine was born in 1823, proclaimed by President James Monroe in a message to the United States Congress. Its essence was simple but powerful: America for Americans. This meant that any attempt by European powers to extend the colonial or political influence in the Western Hemisphere, from Canada to Tierra del Fuego, would be seen as a direct threat to the peace and security of the United States and other American countries. In practice, this doctrine became a tool for active interventions in Latin America and the Caribbean. Let's remember the Roosevelt corollary of 1904, where Theodore Roosevelt added the idea of the big stick. The United States would not only defend, but would intervene to correct unstable governments. This led to several actions in countries like Nicaragua, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and of course Venezuela on several occasions. Now, in the National Security Strategy of November 2025, and confirmed at the conference on January 3, 2026, Trump updates this doctrine as the Trump Corollary, or Donroe Doctrine. It is a reaffirmation of the total preeminence of the United States in the care of the Americas. Its pillars are practical, blocking the influence of ideological competitors like China and Russia, who have gained ground in resources and alliances, controlling massive migratory flows that overload borders, and were used to destabilize the societies of several American countries, fighting drug trafficking, which causes deaths and social degradation worldwide, ensuring access to strategic resources such as Venezuelan oil, Bolivian lithium, or rare minerals throughout South America. Venezuela is presented today as the theater of operations for this renewed protectionist doctrine. Nicolás Maduro, accused of belonging to and leading drug trafficking structures, labeled as a terrorist and wanted by American justice, was captured in a brilliant surgical military operation. The United States will also temporarily administer the country until a safe, adequate, and judicious transition, as Donald Trump described it. Let's also remember that the results of the 2024 elections in Venezuela presented by Maduro's government were not recognized by the Unitary Democratic Platform, the Supreme Court of Justice in exile, the Organization of American States, the European Union, the Group of Seven, the Carter Center, and several other countries. In fact, according to the voting records held by the opposition and made known internationally, Edmundo González was the true winner by a wide margin. In conclusion, for all the countries that did not recognize Maduro as the winner, he effectively falls into the category of usurper. Now let's talk about the pendulum of history. It's not a modern invention. It's an eternal movement inherent to historical development, like a Hegelian dialectic. The excesses of one side inevitably generate the reaction of the other in a cycle that never stops but can temporarily stabilize or balance itself. Let's look at the roots of the left, particularly in its Marxist-Leninist version, which has so influenced the São Paulo Forum and movements like Chavismo. Its original program promises absolute equality through strong statism, greater state control over the economy, nationalizations, massive subsidies, and extensive regulations. In theory, it includes the dictatorship of the proletariat as a temporary transition to a classless, non-oppressive communism. But in practice, that transition becomes eternal, turning into a permanent one-party regime. In the Soviet Union, it lasted 74 years, from the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 until its dissolution in 1991. In Cuba, it's been 67 years since 1959 and counting, with the Communist Party as the leading force. And what happened to the promised equality? Let's look at the facts, without hasty judgments. Ordinary people lived under chronic shortages, endless queues for bread or milk, shared housing where several families struggled for a common bathroom, rationing of basic foods, and a constant fear of repression for dissenting. In Stalin's USSR, famines like the Holodomor killed millions. In the Brezhnev era, stagnation meant waiting years for a car or a low-quality refrigerator. In Cuba, the special period of the 90s brought real famine, and today, in 2026, massive blackouts and salaries, equivalent to $15 to $25 a month, lead to a continuous exodus. Meanwhile, the elite, the Soviet nomenclatura or Fidel's inner circle, enjoyed extreme luxury that contradicted all ideology. In the USSR, leaders like Brezhnev accumulated collections of luxury cars, dachas with swimming pools and private cinemas, special stores with imported caviar and French wines. In Cuba, Fidel had secret residences, a private island with dolphins, yachts, and helicopters. His family still has Mercedes cars, exclusive parties, and access to dollars, while the people queue for basic necessities. This hypocrisy creates a new bureaucratic aristocracy, replacing the previous bourgeoisie with a privileged group that justifies its luxuries as necessary for the revolution. The people see it, suffer it, and sooner or later react with accumulated frustration. Because of this natural reaction to eternal statism and its real inequalities, the pendulum has swung sharply towards the pragmatic right in 2025-2026. We see governments like Javier Milei's in Argentina, consolidated in midterms with state cuts that lowered inflation from over 200% to around 30%. Daniel Noboa in Ecuador, re-elected with a firm hand against drug trafficking. Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, maintaining the state of exception that reduced homicides to historical levels. José Antonio Cast in Chile, winning with 58% and focusing on economic order, and the end of the EMAS in Bolivia, among others. These governments prioritize market freedoms, less state intervention in the economy, deregulation to attract investment, and individual freedoms with strong security. A firm hand against gangs and cartels to protect basic rights like walking without fear. It's not a pure ideological right, but a pragmatic one, aligned with Trump's agenda. Going back to the Donroe Doctrine, this line of thinking doesn't aim to stop the pendulum. That would be an illusion. It does seek to temporarily balance it in a conservative and practical position. Less massive migratory pressure that overloads receiving countries, combating drug trafficking that destabilizes regions, real security as in El Salvador, where people now go out at night without fear of gangs, and a more stable economy as in Argentina after Milei's adjustment, and above all in a full democratic regime and total respect for freedom. Regarding post-Maduro Venezuela, the exodus of some 8 million people could be reduced, alleviating neighbors like Colombia, Peru, and Chile. A kind of Concord Pact, as I have suggested in previous videos, governments aligned with American pragmatism, left-wing parties realigning with the modern world, focusing more on people's well-being and less on their historical leaders. Let's remember, the pendulum is always sensitive to new imbalances like extreme inequality or unlimited authoritarianism. At the end of the day, what really counts is not cold geopolitics or grand speeches. It's the real lives of ordinary people, those who wake up every morning to work, raise children, and seek a bit of dignity. During decades of eternal statism in models like the USSR or Cuba, millions lived with constant fear, persistent hunger, and without basic freedoms, restricted expression, limited property, restricted movement. Families queuing for essentials, children growing up in scarcity, dreams cut short by a system that promised paradise but delivered oppressive bureaucracy. Today, in this temporary stabilization phase, we see tangible changes. Safer streets to go out at night without fear of gangs, as in El Salvador, under Bukele, or Ecuador, with Noboa. Prices that don't eat up the entire salary, as in Argentina after Milei's adjustment. Less pressure in neighborhoods from massive migratory waves that generate social backlash. Children going to school without the constant terror of violence or instability. The evidence that irrefutable proof where people vote with their feet shows that many seek order, tranquility, and real opportunities, even if it is under strong and pragmatic leadership. As long as this relative pause lasts, it favors millions living better, with a little more peace in their daily lives. In times of so much noise, polarization, and rapid changes, Stoic thought becomes an essential tool to seek truth with clarity, maintain emotional balance, and focus on what truly depends on us. Our attitude towards the historical ebb and flow, because as we well know, thinking well is living better. Understanding the pendulum's movement with a serene mind, without anger or utopian illusions, allows us to enjoy this balance, the peace in the streets, the stability in our pockets, the tranquility for our family, while the pendulum continues its inevitable course, responding to new excesses. In the next video of the series, The Invisible Puzzle, we will explore the role of the São Paulo Forum and how the left, with its promises and contradictions, could have contributed to this current swing. What do you think? Do you feel that in your country, in your city, daily life is a little calmer or more stable these months? Or do you see signs of an upcoming crisis? Tell me in the comments, subscribe, so you don't miss what's coming, and like if this analysis made you think. Thanks for being here, friends. A big hug from the heart. Until next time.